is that raw food is not safe to feed. If you could touch on that a little bit, and what do these manufacturers do to ensure safety protocols?
Yeah, well, I'm glad we start with that one because that is probably one of the biggest misconceptions out there, that it's not safe. Most of the reputable companies out there are doing a few things. One, it starts with where they're getting the ingredients for their food. So they're getting high quality ingredients, and you should be able to research that. You should be able to check on that and know where they're getting their food from and what the quality of it is. So high quality ingredients followed by rigorous hygiene practices in these companies that start with the way that they utilize something called high pressure processing for a lot of them, that subjects these foods to a natural chemical free pasteurization process that gets rid of bad bacteria and saves the nutritional value of the ingredients of the food. And then testing.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are going to talk about raw pet food and maybe some of the myths that go along with raw feeding. We're lucky enough to have Dr. Vernon with us. He's a veterinarian and a store owner as well that specializes and sells natural pet food. Welcome, Dr. Vernon. How are you doing today?
Good, great. Thank you for having me.
If you could give us maybe a little bit of a background, you've gone through veterinarian school, and what's some of the education that they put on for raw diets?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great place to start. Unfortunately, it's a short answer. There's not a lot of education about raw diets in vet school.
Okay.
And there was none when I was there, and maybe a little now, but not much.
And knowing that, I know that you've taken some time to really research and learn about raw diets, and that's one of the big reasons why you're selling it in your stores. Tell us some of the benefits that you see when you see a pet that's been raw fed.
Absolutely. Well, we could go on for hours about the benefits, but I think that, simply put, you'll see a huge improvement in their hair coats. We'll see a lot of the digestive issues that everybody just chalks up to that's just the way dogs are. You'll see improvement in digestive issues, less diarrhea, less vomiting, smaller stool production. And maybe the biggest one, and the one that would be most interesting to people, would be helping with the skin irritation that comes from dogs' intolerances to different foods. And then weight loss is an incredibly valuable tool for feeding raw diets.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't see too many raw fed pets out there that are overweight. Typically, if that's the case, they're getting a lot of extra treats.
There's something else in there. And picky eaters, that's another great benefit.
Yes,
These
picky eaters.
Dogs eat kibble very willingly, will do really well on a raw diet.
Very, very true. They gravitate to the raw food. Just to touch a little bit back on the digestion, raw food has a higher moisture content versus kibble. I know there's a lot of great kibbles out there, but if you could just touch a little bit on just the digestive part of that, and why raw food's more bioavailable.
Yeah, so the overall health of every dog is completely and directly related to the health of their digestive system. And so raw diets will support a healthy gut microbiome. That's the bacteria, the good bacteria that lives in our digestive system. And when that's healthy and happy, our immune system is healthy and happy. And so these dogs get sick less, and we don't have to overwork their immune system. And so we see benefits in their hair coat, their skin health, and their overall energy level, and their lean muscle mass, and just tons of benefits just because we're putting less strain on their digestive system and making it easier to digest these foods, and therefore unlocking the nutrients that are in there.
Very true. Much, much more bioavailable for that pet. I always use the connection of I could eat, protein bars that are complete and balanced, but it's still a protein bar. It's still processed, versus eating, a quality protein with quality fruits and veggies, whole food. Yeah. Right. So there's a lot of myths out there that we are constantly hearing about, and consumers hear about all the time, and kind of makes them fearful about trying raw food. So I'd like to kind of debunk some of these myths and just talk about why some of these myths just simply aren't true. One of the biggest ones we hear is that raw food is not safe to feed. If you could touch on that a little bit, and what do these manufacturers do to ensure safety protocols?
Yeah, well, I'm glad we start with that one because that is probably one of the biggest misconceptions misconceptions out there that it's not safe. Most of the reputable companies out there are doing a few things. One, it starts with where they're getting the ingredients for their food. So they're getting high quality ingredients, and you should be able to research that. You should be able to check on that and know where they're getting their food from and what the quality of it is. So high quality ingredients followed by rigorous hygiene practices in these companies that start with the way that they utilize something called high pressure processing for a lot of them, that subjects these foods to a natural chemical free pasteurization process that gets rid of bad bacteria and saves the nutritional value of the ingredients of the food. And then testing. They test the food when it gets there. They test it while they're producing it. They test it before they send it out. In most cases, I feel like the food that is coming from these reputable companies producing these raw diets have meticulously tested these diets to the point that it is probably tested more than the food that we eat ourselves. And so when we get that from a reputable company and we handle it properly at our homes, we can feel very comfortable that we're feeding a safe diet.
So we kind of talked about the safety protocols. Another myth that we hear that goes along with these manufacturers is that they're not complete and balanced. And I don't know if that comes from homemade diets versus manufactured prepared diets. So maybe touch on why that seems to be such a concern or a thought about raw food.
Yeah, definitely a myth out there is that raw diets lack balance. And while this myth may be a little bit true in that some of the homemade raw diets out there can be incomplete nutritionally, the raw diets that are coming from reputable companies are formulated to be complete and balanced. These diets have gone through meticulous testing and research by veterinary nutritionists and other nutritionists who rigorously test these to ensure that they meet the standards. And so when you see that statement on the food, complete and balanced, on a raw diet, you can feel completely confident that it meets the nutritional standards that are set up for them. And not only that, in many cases, it's exceeding those requirements because of just the quality and the bioavailability of these diets. And there are some out there are some raw products that are not complete and balanced, but they are not intended to be, and they'll be used for treats or toppers or mix-ins. It'll be very clear on the labeling.
Yep. The key is to make sure that we're all checking the back of the label, whether it's a kibble, freeze-dried, dehydrated food, whatever the food is, you want to make sure that it's adequate for your life stage of your pet and for everyday feeding. So very good points. One of the last myths that we hear that, there's probably a top 3, right? We talked about food safety. We talked about it not being complete and balanced. The other one is that there's this need out there that people think they have to feed kibble in order to keep their pets' teeth clean. And that how could they keep their pets' teeth clean with a raw diet? Because when they're eating the raw food, it just kind of slides off the teeth. So there's no scraping. But maybe you could kind of talk about the difference in the quality of some of the kibbles out there, especially if they're on an ultra processed kibble versus a high quality raw diet.
Yeah, I think it's a common belief out there and probably been passed down like folklore that kibble is better for your dog's health than feeding anything else, but that is definitely a myth. The fact that kibble helps to scrape tartar off the teeth is actually maybe even misleading in that it might be contributing to more tartar for a lot of these dogs because of the starchy carbohydrates that are in a lot of these diets that actually is providing the food. It's feeding the bacteria that causes the plaque buildup on these teeth. So we see all the time, and in my practice, I see it all the time, that the dental health of dogs sees a marked improvement when they make a change to a raw diet. The raw meaty bones and the structure of the food that they are eating is like a natural toothbrush. And I've seen wonderful improvements. So, of course, if we're going to use raw meaty bones, we need to make sure that we're choosing appropriate bones and that we're supervising our dogs and we're aware of their chewing habits and we know they're going to be okay. But if we do those things, it can be a very helpful part of their diet for their dental health. And of course, it doesn't take the place of doing your preventative care with a dental procedures with your veterinarian, but it will take that procedure and turn it into what it's meant to be, a routine cleaning and maintaining healthy teeth rather than costly procedures where we're having to extract teeth. And that might be one of the myths out there as well that we didn't mention, is that it's too expensive to feed raw diets.
Yeah. Thank
But
you.
if you take into consideration the cost savings of the health of your dog and not having to pay big bills to your veterinarian because you're feeding the raw diet, you can't afford not to feed it.
No, and you make such a valid point. It is something that, I talk to my friends who are asking me, what do you feed your dog? Why do you feed raw? And they'll say, gosh, it seems expensive. And I do tell them it's not a cure-all, right? Of course, it's not going to prevent 100% of anything, but I always say I'd rather give my pets a fighting chance if I'm feeding them the most species appropriate diet, the most bioavailable diet out there, then at least I'm giving their body a fighting chance. And so that if they do get ill or have an illness, hopefully they recover much quicker or in a healthier way than if they were eating a very ultra processed, poor quality, high carbohydrate diet. So it's a very valid point that you make. So I'm glad you brought that up. I appreciate your time and going through these. I think we've kind of dispelled some of these. So hopefully, some people will feel much more confident in trying raw, even as a topper or as an add-in or a few meals a week, or completely converting their pet over to the diet. There's lots of ways that raw can benefit their pets. So I appreciate your time today, Dr. Vernon, and I look forward to some future topics that we'll be chatting about.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.